You walk into an elevator, the doors slide shut, and suddenly it's just you and a casual acquaintance. For the next 30 seconds, neither of you says a word. Your eyes dart to the floor indicator, you suddenly find the texture of your shoes fascinating, and your chest tightens with a weird, suffocating pressure. You did this today, or last week, without even thinking about it. We call it awkward silence, and we treat it like a minor modern social glitch, a byproduct of living in crowded cities with people we barely know. But here's the thing. That sudden spike of panic you feel when a conversation drops dead is not a modern glitch at all. It is a biological survival mechanism. It is older than polite conversation, older than language itself, and older than the concept of being polite. Long before our ancestors had words for hello or goodbye, they had a deep, terrifying relationship with quiet. The question is, how did a simple absence of sound become one of the most stressful experiences in human psychology? To understand why a quiet elevator feels like a high-stakes interrogation, we have to go back to the beginning. We have to go back to a time when silence did not mean a break in the conversation. It meant death. Imagine the African Savannah, roughly 2 million years ago. You are an early hominid, likely Homo erectus, navigating a landscape thick with megafauna. In this world, sound is data. The rustle of dry grass means a leopard is stalking you. The distant chatter of birds means a water source is nearby. The rhythmic, guttural grunts of your tribe mean everything is safe. In the wild, total silence is an anomaly. It usually happens for only one reason. An apex predator is nearby, and every living creature has frozen to avoid detection. For millions of years of human evolution, a sudden drop in ambient sound was the ultimate alarm bell. It meant freeze, hide, or prepare to fight. Your brain learned to associate silence with an immediate existential threat. When the room goes quiet today, your ancient amygdala does not know you are just standing next to Dave from accounting. It thinks a saber-toothed cat is clearing its throat behind the copier. But as humans evolved, our relationship with sound shifted from surviving predators to surviving each other. And that brings us to our first real historical anchor point. In the late 1990s, an evolutionary psychologist named Dunbar started looking at how primates maintain their social structures. Monkeys and apes spend up to 20% of their day grooming each other, picking bugs out of fur. It looks like hygiene, but it's actually social glue. It releases endorphins, builds trust, and forms alliances. But as human brains grew larger, our ancestral groups expanded from small bands of 30 to tribes of 150. If we spent 20% of our day picking bugs out of each other's hair to stay friendly, we would have starved to death. We needed a way to groom each other at a distance. So we invented vocal grooming. We started making rhythmic noises, laughs, and proto-words while we gathered food or built tools. It allowed one human to groom 5 or 6 people at the same time just by using their voice. The message of these vocalizations was simple. I'm here, I'm friendly, and we're good. Constant vocal chatter replaced physical touching as the primary way we proved we belonged to the group. Think about that. For hundreds of thousands of years, continuous vocal noise was the literal audio signal that you were an accepted member of the tribe. If the vocal grooming stopped, it meant you were isolated. And in the ancient world, isolation was a death sentence. A lone human cannot outrun a lion or hunt a mammoth. To be cast out was to die. So the brain evolved a hypersensitive radar for any break in the social audio stream. This brings us to a fascinating piece of modern research that reveals exactly how fast this radar works. In 2011, a psychologist named Namke Coudenberg at the University of Groningen ran a series of brilliant experiments. She placed participants in conversations where a hidden disruptor would purposefully allow a silence to linger. The researchers discovered something remarkable. It takes exactly 4 seconds of silence in a conversation for a human being to start feeling anxious, rejected, and structurally insecure. 4 seconds. That is all it takes for your subconscious to panic. The researchers noted that this distress did not happen because the topic of conversation was difficult. It happened because the pause itself threatened the validation of the social bond. When the words stop flowing, your brain immediately flashes a warning light. Connection lost. Are we still okay? Am I about to be exiled? Here's what makes this so important. We think we use language primarily to trade facts, share data, or debate ideas, but we do not. The vast majority of human language is just high-tech ape grooming. It is phatic communication, words that carry zero actual information but serve entirely to maintain social harmony. When you ask someone, "How about this weather?" you do not care about the meteorology. You are saying, "I am a safe, predictable member of your tribe." But this raises a massive problem. If humans are so terrifyingly allergic to silence, how did we ever manage to build a complex civilization that requires deep thought, quiet study, and sustained focus? The answer lies in how we turned silence from a weapon of terror into a tool of power. As human societies grew larger and more stratified, we began to realize that controlling silence was the ultimate status symbol. Let us jump ahead to the year 1022 AD, deep inside the imperial courts of the Song dynasty in China. A scholar bureaucrat enters the grand hall to present a report to the emperor. In this environment, the rules of noise are inverted. The lower your status, the more you have to speak, flatter, and fill the air with high-pitched reassurances. The emperor, however, sits in absolute, heavy silence. He does not need to use vocal grooming to prove he belongs. He owns the space. When he speaks, it is brief, and when he stops speaking, the silence that follows is not awkward, it's paralyzing for everyone else. This was the birth of conversational asymmetry. High-status individuals began using silence intentionally to exert dominance. If you look at ancient manuals of rhetoric, from Cicero in Rome to court etiquette in medieval Europe, the advice is consistent. The man who can hold a silence without squirming holds the power. The awkwardness you feel in a quiet room is often a subconscious submission dynamic. You feel an overwhelming urge to fill the void with words, because your brain assumes that whoever is keeping the silence must be the alpha predator in the room. You babble just to keep them happy. But as history marched on, humans found an even deeper, stranger use for the quiet. We used it to look inward. Around the 4th century AD, a massive shift occurred in how humans interacted with written words. For most of antiquity, reading was a loud, communal activity. Documents were read aloud to groups. In fact, ancient texts didn't even have spaces between words. It was just a continuous wall of letters designed to be spoken. But then, Christian monks in the deserts of Egypt and Ireland began practicing a radical new discipline, silent reading. When the theologian Augustine visited St. Ambrose in Milan in 384 AD, he wrote about his shock at seeing Ambrose read without making a sound. Augustine noted that Ambrose's voice was silent and his tongue was still. He found it completely bizarre. Why would someone choose to keep the words inside their head? What those monks discovered was that by shutting out the external vocal grooming of the world, they could unlock a totally different state of human consciousness. Silent reading created an internal sandbox for the mind. It allowed for deep introspection, complex philosophy, and the birth of individual identity. Silence was no longer a sign of social rejection. It became the ultimate luxury, the greenhouse of the modern intellect. And yet, despite thousands of years of monastic meditation, imperial power plays, and silent reading, we still can't shake that primal elevator panic. We still cannot survive 4 seconds with Dave from accounting. Why? Because the modern world has weaponized our ancient fear of isolation. Today, we live in an era of constant artificial vocal grooming. Phatic communication has gone digital. The ping of a notification, the endless scroll of a feed, the background hum of a podcast while you fold laundry, these are just high-tech versions of our ancestors grunting around the campfire. We've engineered a world where we never have to experience true silence, which means our tolerance for it has dropped to an all-time low. When the noise finally stops, even for a moment, the contrast is jarring. The ancient survival alarm rings louder than ever. So here's the full picture. Millions of years ago, silence meant an apex predator was hunting you. Hundreds of thousands of years ago, it meant you were being ostracized from the tribe. By the Middle Ages, we learned to use it as a tool of political dominance, even as monks used it to discover the modern inner self. And yet, today, we fight a daily battle between our evolutionary need for noise and the terrifying clarity of a quiet room. The next time you find yourself trapped in a brutal, agonizingly quiet conversation, and you feel that frantic urge to say something, anything about the weather, take a breath. Remind yourself that you're not failing a social test. You're just experiencing a 2 million-year-old echo. Your brain is just trying to make sure you're still part of the pack. If you want to dive deeper into the strange, evolutionary quirks that make us human, hit the buttons below. Or, just sit here in the quiet for a bit. See how long you can last.